Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you, and it's time for another amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. I'm very excited to bring you another in this series here on my YouTube channel. If this is your first time tuning in, please consider subscribing to the channel. We do put out one of these amazing Spider-Man videos every Monday morning at 8 a.m. And if you're subscribed, you'll see it in your subscription list. You can also click the notify button and you'll be notified as soon as the videos are available. So check those out. We have a playlist here on the channel that goes all the way back to Amazing Fantasy number 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. So if you're enjoying these and you enjoy these Spider-Man comics, check them out. We go through every single one every week. Of course, thank you all to everybody who's been supporting the channel. Greatly appreciate everybody who's subscribed. Thank you. Spread the word, let your friends know, and have them jump on board as well. Today, we're looking at a pretty big, well, by today's standards, what would be considered a pretty big milestone in comics, and that is issue number 25 of The Amazing Spider-Man. So there are sort of anniversary issues when it comes to comics, 25, 50, 100, those big milestone numbers. It doesn't necessarily reflect a publishing schedule because it's monthly. So really it'd be your 12s, your 12, 24, 36, 48 would you'd think would be big, but just in general, in culture, we tend to celebrate those numbers like 25, 50, 100, etc. So here we are on the 25th issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And yeah, this is a neat one. It has some key points that are important to cover. And so without further ado, let's get into the story right away. Okay, so here we have the cover for Amazing Spider-Man number 25. And I think this is a really cool cover. I love the size of the figure on the cover. I guess we'll say figures. So this is a robot that J. Jonah Jameson uses to try to capture and come after Spider-Man in this issue. A lot of times we see the figures are much smaller with more background on some of the covers. This, we have a very large figure. I love the intricacies of these robot coils that are used to wrap around and try to capture Spidey. That part's really cool. The maniacal look on J. Jonah Jameson's face through the machine is excellent. I also like the cover, or the color choice of the cover. So you have Spidey, which of course is in primary red and blue colors. Your third primary color is yellow. And so it's a great choice to put on the background. It makes the red and the blue both pop. And then of course the robot itself is a gray. So as a neutral color, it also stands out well against that yellow. So excellent choice there. I think it's really good. The only thing that I thought was strange about this cover is the way that Spidey is shooting this sort of web fluid. It's not even his typical standard webbing. It's more like it's just the web fluid, which he's done a few times, almost using it like a glue. But the fact that it's coming straight out of his wrists, perpendicular to his arms, as opposed to parallel to his arms along the palm, is something very different. And I don't know where that would have come from. Is it just the figure, this is the best pose for the figure, and so you just kind of fudge it and go, maybe Spidey can adjust the nozzle and shoot it sideways. We don't, if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe we see it like this in the comic. Everything is the traditional where he's shooting his webs and it's coming out from the wrist, again, parallel with the arm. But that's okay. They would take some artistic liberties. Again, if you try to change this form of Spidey to make it so that this arm is pointing at the robot and then this arm also pointing with the web fluid coming out, it would diminish some of the balance, right? So you have this element, the arm element over here, juxtaposed with the leg, the hand with this leg. So you have the figure spread out well. If you drew both arms forward, again, would sort of unbalance the composition. So again, it's a fine choice. It's just something to note that's a little bit different. Here we go into the book itself. I say this on every video, so I apologize to long-time viewers who have heard this before. This is a scanned PDF copy of the original book. So this is exactly the way it looked, as you can see here, with the original ads and everything like that, as well as yellowing newsprint paper. These are scanned copies of the book that Marvel put together in 2004 and put on CD-ROM, so you could view them like this on your computer. We have our splash page. We've seen something like this very often, a sort of interesting montage-ish, the faces of the key players who are in this issue combined with an element in the background. I thought that it's not the greatest splash page that we've seen so far in terms of recapping sort of what's happening in the issue. I found it sort of campy, this idea with the motion lines that the two of them are chasing each other around a chimney on a rooftop. Seems a little silly, but it perfectly works. You know, it's fine. I do want to point this out, that this is officially the first plot credit that Steve Ditko gets in Spider-Man. So what that means, again, is that he came up with the through line, the overall story arc of what happens. A scientist comes up with a robot to capture Spider-Man, to try to sell it or make money from J. Jonah Jameson, to get Jonah to use it to capture Spider-Man, to discredit him. You've got some other stuff going on in the background as far as the B plot line, if you will, things with Aunt May, Betty Brant, and Liz Allen, Flash Thompson's jealousy of Peter, all that kind of stuff. So that whole overall story was done by Steve. He then drew the issue, and then he gave it to Stan Lee, and Stan Lee comes in and writes all the dialogue and all the narration blurbs based on what the art looks like. So true, what they call today the Marvel style of working in comics, to a T. So fantastic there. Congratulations to Steve for getting plot credit finally. It's good for him. I think most artists today probably deserve some kind of story or plot credit. I think they do a lot of the storytelling as well. But again, it's always dependent on the artist and the writer and how they work. So we jump right into the story right after issue number 24. Lots of panels in this issue, and I'm going to cover that. We've talked about it many times about why you would use lots of panels close together, especially this exact same size panels. It helps emphasize the rhythm and the pacing of the story. Images that you see are happening in immediate sequence from one another, as opposed to cutting from one scene to another. That's the best way to use this 9-panel grid. To be honest, I don't know that this really does that. I think there's just a lot of story to go over in this issue, and so I think it's also possible that Steve that's the format he really liked to work in, is that 9 panels, or many panels, and so kind of fell into that when he's the one sort of directing the show in terms of that. Now, I believe he was always the one deciding what panels, splash pages versus a half a splash page, 1 panel versus 8 panels, whatever it was. But in this case, it just, like I said, this issue particularly happens to have a lot of panels in it. There's some good angles here that are pretty interesting. So I did say, my note here says on these 2 pages, there's very good camera movement. So again, I refer to the angle and the choice of angle of the image and what angle it's drawn from for where the viewer's eye would be is if you're looking through a camera. So that's how we talk about it all the time. So when I say camera, that's what I mean. So here you have a nice sort of down shot showing in a Dutch angle shot. We talked about that a lot in this series. of Spidey, Peter crawling up the building to retrieve his spider signal. Then some nice down shots showing what he is seeing down on the street below. And then we zoom in a little bit even closer over his shoulder, which is nice. We pan back, then move the camera to the police officer, the criminals who are trying to steal the car, and then we're down kind of ground level. So you see the criminals and the cop coming up to arrest them. Overall, nice to move the camera around so that it's not the same exact angle in every shot, especially when you have this many panels. Over here as well, we have a slight down shot here, so the camera is poised up above so that we can see what Peter's doing. He's working on a spare costume. That is a big trope. We see Peter having to recreate his costume over and over and over again over the years, and always and he always comments on how much he hates doing it, but apparently he's really, really good at it because he does it quite often. And then again, here we have more of a close-up of Jonah in front of Peter, in front of Betty. Very nice use of depth there, again, with a somewhat close-up to get us space into the panel and the image. So overall, very nice there. Moving the camera around, great job. That's a great way to keep the reader interest. If you have it set on the same plane over and over, it just gets a little dull, or it can. So here we go. This introduces a character named Smythe, who is an inventor, and he becomes actually a big character in Spidey in a couple of ways. So no spoilers for anybody who hasn't read ahead in Spidey history, but this is not the first robot, or not the last robot that he makes to try to capture Spider-Man. And in fact, the mantle ends up getting passed on to his son, who ends up playing a pretty big role in the 1990s Spider-Man cartoon that was on Fox. That character, I mean, he had his own action figures. He was a very central role for a while in those stories. So here we see the first appearance of Smythe, and what later becomes, again, spoilers, sorry, the robots that he creates become Spider Slayers, is what they're called, the Spider Slayers. So pretty interesting here. Again, we're still in many panels as they're trying to get Jonah to agree. Peter thinks it's in his own best interest because he can take some photos of it, because he has no doubt that this robot's not a problem, right? No big deal. So now the robot's supposed to sense a spider, that he has a spider in a glass ball, but of course this robot senses him, but nobody can tell the difference because he's holding the spider. Great angle here, really nice. I put great tendrils. I wasn't sure what else to call them, but the way that they come from the robot out towards us, the reader, and then tangle around. Same here, where he's trying to pull him apart and realizes he can't throughout the rest of the page. Very, very nice detailing. I thought that was really, really interesting. Again, interesting design on a robot to capture a Spider-Man, to make all these super tendrils that would come out. So there's a couple of things here to point out. One is, of course, you have Dr. Octopus, who has had some success, obviously not ultimate success, but some success fighting Spider-Man with multiple tendrils, multiple arms. So you take that to the extreme, and now you have this. So maybe that's some of that. The other thing was, this reminded me a little bit of the story of the living brain. So if we go back in the series, you'll see that issue. So again, it's a robot. This one wasn't made to hunt Spider-Man per se, but it ends up going haywire and attacking Spider-Man, and Peter has to find a way to defeat it. And again, this sort of reminded me of that a little bit. Maybe taking that, the kernel of that story, and going, hey, maybe there's a little more to that, and putting it into this idea of a robot specifically designed to hunt Spider-Man. So anyway, it just reminded me of that a little bit. Again, here we have some more interactions, just in the on again, off again relationship with Betty and Peter. is just crazy. It seems like she's 1 minute she's jealous, then the next minute she's angry because he's um you know, he's suggesting that they capture Spider-Man, and then, you know, she's mad though, even though she hates Spider-Man because Spider-Man was involved in her brother's death. And so the whole Betty Brant on again, off again thing is crazy to me. And you go, okay, whatever. Um, so now we've got, of course, Flash. So Liz Allen, the blonde, has been sort of flirting with Peter, but Flash likes her, and I think they were dating early in the series, and so now he's telling he's gonna beat up Peter. Peter's not, you know, he's not worried about that, but he's worried about this robot. So again, from an art standpoint, there's nothing out of the ordinary coming here. You've got a lot of panels, so a lot of small drawings, good figures, good faces, but a lot of talking heads is what we call that. When you have a lot of pages full of dialogue and people talking to each other and not much else happening, we call that talking heads, and that's kind of what we have here. So now the robot's going to go after Peter, and again, 9 more panels, and it's okay. There's nothing to write home about in terms of anything overly creative from an artistic standpoint. Solid drawing, solid backgrounds, good use of the backgrounds here of him coming out the door. Little touches to show you where you are, whether you're inside a classroom, inside an office building, etc. Let's see here. Oh, so this one, so Peter is fleeing Flash and his friends because he's really fleeing the robot. They don't realize the robot is chasing Peter. So here we have this fun down shot. So you have the robot and people chasing the robot. You have the robot chasing Peter, not knowing that he's Spider-Man. You have this group of kids in the way, and then Peter running at the beginning. And everything is very, very small, but that's a neat down shot to kind of show the whole scenario all in one. And that's again, that's where you need a larger panel to do that. You're not going to be able to get away by explaining how much turmoil is going on with everything around this chase in a little 3x5 panel. You're going to need bigger space for that. So here we go. Now we finally get to Spidey. So Peter has changed and he's beginning to flee the robot. Because he knows once the coils get wrapped around him, there's not a lot he can do. This close-up is pretty good. Again, I always like it whenever you have a close-up framing the action behind. So you use Spidey in the foreground to show Jonah in his face, you know, ranting at him from behind. That's a great use of a close-up there. But again, nothing else extraordinary. Here's kind of the scene. It's not quite the same because he's not wrapped up, but here Spidey is trying to use his webbing fluid as fluid. He calls it his liquid webbing, and it just drips off. Then he tries his traditional webs, but the arms of the robot rip the webs off, so it doesn't work. And now we're running again. This is nice. He flips out of the way, and the robot's trying to grab him. The twist of the body is very good. The overlapping of the leg in front of Spidey's body and the leg in front, very good. We're looking slightly up as he's coming down, so that brings more action and excitement to the panel and to the drawing. That's really good. This is the kind of thing, though, that does hurt with old style coloring, and here's what I mean. So with the old kind of coloring, you had to literally take the same piece of paper and pass it under different plates of ink that would allow certain color ink to be applied to the paper. So you would pass all your reds, and then all your blues, and then all your yellows, and then probably all your grays, and then your black. And so ends up happening is that's how you print back then, which means you can't have a million different shades of blue in Spidey's costume, because every different shade of a color that's a delineated color has its own pass of the paper through the old printing mechanism. Okay. Today it's a lot different. But what that means is this blue is one solid shade of blue, and it blends in very much with the arm, with the sort of hip of the other leg, and of course this part of the side of his chest that's blue, and an underarm. So it's kind of hard to see, especially at a smaller image like this. And that's just a downside to the coloring. So when you have a larger image where like this arm is in front of the leg and the blues kind of overlap, it's not a big deal. Same over here. The overlap, it's clear we can see the outline and the definition of the limbs, even though they're the same color. It's not a problem. This one's a little more problematic, but it's still a very good dynamic figure. So again, that's just a limitation of the older printing process compared to what you can do today with digital printing. This is a very nice foreshortened image, image in perspective, climbing up the wall. I love anytime we have Spidey wall crawling at us, either up or down a building. You have great foreshortening. We've talked about this in the past, but foreshortening is the way that you draw something coming at the reader, at the visual, and it makes it shorter, meaning the length of my finger like this, my hand this way, measuring seems much longer than if I do it this way, right? So it's only, in camera, it's, this big versus when you tip it up, it's much bigger. And that's foreshortening. It's the perspective of things coming at the viewer combined with overlapping. So the hand overlaps the wrist because it's behind it. The forearm overlaps the bicep in front of the face. All that gives us a sense of three-dimensionality in something coming at the viewer, at the camera, at the reader. So this is an excellent view of that. I like anytime we get that. Again, I wish it would be bigger. I think that would be great. But I understand, again, there's a lot of story you see. There's a lot of dialogue and a lot of explanation in every panel. So sometimes that's how it goes. Again, here, more panels. Betty is trying to stop the robot and failing. And now she thinks she can call Peter and see if he can help. And the phone is busy. And you can see, right, we have 6 panels across the bottom of a page. That is a ton. But this is a good use for it, because this is her picking up the phone, ringing, pacing for a minute, picking up the phone. It's still busy. Oh no, listening to what sounds coming from the other room, picking up the phone, calling again, and finally saying, forget it. I'm going to run over there because nobody is on the phone, or nobody's going to answer the phone. So, good. This is a great use of the pace for this. It makes perfect sense. Some more stuff here. Another close up, which is cool to use again for Jonah and framing the robot in the background. That's very nice. Here's the big one. So both Liz and Betty are looking for Peter at the same time, and they both show up at his house, and Aunt May opens the door, and who else is there but Mary Jane Watson? So I know there is a very specific splash page that we all know of, if you're a comic book fan, Marvel fan, Spidey fan, where we see Mary Jane Watson for the first time. But technically, I believe this is her first visual appearance. Now, we do not see her face. However, she's identified as Mary Jane. We see a figure. Technically, I believe this would be really the first appearance. The one you want, of course, is the one where you see her face. I understand, but I thought this was very interesting, and that they've teased this again. Here's Mary Jane. Aunt May has been trying to fix up Peter with Mary Jane forever. He has no idea. He thinks she must be horribly desperate to have these two old ladies trying to fix her up on dates all the time. Like, what's going on? And you see the reaction of these two girls, and they are shocked at how beautiful this Mary Jane is. and they're like, holy smokes. Uh, so very nice. Again, it's a clever way. We've seen this in movies like Austin Powers and things where there's this very specifically positioned foreground object to cover things in the background. In this case, Mary Jane's face. So I think that is very, very funny. And I really like that a lot. So again, more 9 panels. Not again, more a lot of talking heads. Yes, Spidey pacing around, trying to, catch his breath, and this robot's still after him. But again, nothing overly exciting that I would talk about in terms of the art. It's solid, but there's nothing out of the ordinary. Here now we start getting into, again, now the coils or tendrils. I called them coils. I think that's what that's what Spidey calls them, the coils, and they're continuing to be drawn in this intricate pattern throughout the rest of the issue, and I think that's great. Again, remember, Steve Ditko is not only is he drawing this book, so he's planning out every page. How am I going to tell the story? How many panels is it going to take? What angles do I take? The design of the robot. When am I going to add this subplot? All these kinds of things. And then on top of it, he's both drawing it in pencil, then he's also inking it. So he's doing kind of 2 art jobs in one, and trying to do it in like a 20-something day deadline. Because then you've got to turn it around to the colorist and the letterer. So you could have made this 4 arms, 6 arms. They could have just come out straight and wrapped around him like a mummy. But to give all this space and to tie it sort of into knots and tendrils and swirls and stuff, and to keep drawing that over and over is just a testament to an artist who understands that you can take a shortcut for things like deadline purposes, but if you don't have to, don't, because it's much more impactful and cool when you see something like this as opposed to what I described, which is just, they sort of shoot out and just wrap around him in a cylinder. That's boring. This is really cool. So he's struggling. This is a great close-up. I love this tendril coming across between over the bridge of his nose and where his nose expands. I'll say this, over the years, people have, it depends on the artist. Some artists give Spidey more of a nose so that his, the nose comes out and then the mask comes straight down. Others give him a much more rounded mask, almost like it's a shield, like there's a hard plate in there. Neither one is wrong to me. I think it just depends on the artist's interpretation. In this particular case, it's nice in that you can see this tendril wrapping around his head, which really helps heighten the sense of danger. So anyway, Spidey, the Jameson and Smythe are like, all right, he's captured, let's go get him. So they leave the monitor so they can no longer see through the camera on the robot, right? So the face is gone. So now Spidey's going to get in there and use his brains to disable the robot. By the time Smythe and Jameson get there, they see him, they go over, and when he pulls the mask off, there's no inside. There's no one inside. And here we have Peter is using his webbing to puppet his costume. Now, here's my problem with this. What's inside the suit? This suit has form. It has muscles. It has fingers that are wrapped around and it, one of the coils. So is it's not drawn. I mean, if you look inside here, we'll zoom in a little bit. To me, it's drawn hollow and empty, right? You can see this red on the inside. So, and the mask is completely empty. So what filled out the mask? Is it full of webbing? If it is, I would have liked to have seen it. Maybe some of the webbing getting pulled away with the mask, but we don't see it. So what's inside the costume? That's my great question. What is inside of it? I don't know. Um, very, very interesting. Here's another question. So when we see, well, I don't know. I'd have to go back and see specifically. I don't know um if he says. So Spidey is just fleeing from the robot. And he doesn't indicate at any point does he say something like I've doubled back. Or oh, I'm back where I started. It chased me back here, something. So where were his clothes? So, I mean, these guys rush in, they get in a cab, they climb I don't get the impression that there's a ton of time because they're getting, this guy's, they're telling him to go faster, faster. Seconds later, after they get out of the cab, they're climbing this thing. So, where does clothes come from? Should be back where he changed, but I don't get the impression that he's anywhere near where he changed. So, again, there's some plot holes that, again, you know, in a comic, real quick, what is this? This is a 12-cent comic book. For a 12-cent comic book, don't worry about it. Right? Uh, but as we're being able to look back on it, hindsight being 2020 and our vision being clear, where did Peter get the clothes from? What's inside this costume? It doesn't make any sense. So there we go. So Mary Jane leaves. Even Flash is like, whew. He's stunned by her looks. So very interesting. And then Peter heads home. And unfortunately, Aunt May has found the extra costume that he made for himself, and he has to explain this away. So this is another trope of Peter having to fool Aunt May when she finds some sort of evidence about him being Spider-Man, and of course she buys it. And so there's your trope. And so now, what's interesting is that this plays into the next several issues. Actually, Peter trying to figure out. So Jonah has his costume, his main costume. Aunt May has found and is getting rid of his spare costume. So what's he going to do? And it's interesting that plot line does follow through for the next two issues as well. So it's kind of neat that we have this running throughput storyline, which I like a lot. It's a good plot thread to keep going so that you're rewarding the readers that come back every month as opposed to just the ones that pick up an issue here and an issue there. And so that's a nice thing that we're starting to see more and more often here with the Spidey series, is that some ongoing plot lines. So excellent. And that is the end of the book. And let's bring it back to the desk and we'll sum it all up and go from there. So that is Amazing Spider-Man 25. Again, no fanfare at the time that I'm aware of. It was just another issue. Again, today we'd be celebrating when a comic book series gets to issue number 25. That would be a big milestone. Probably have a fancy cover, variant covers, maybe a double size issue, a guest artist, who knows. But we'd make sure that it was a big deal. So to sum up, it's a good story. It's interesting. It does have parts of it that play into a lot of stuff down the road. So the introduction of the inventor Smythe and his penchant for building robots to try to capture Spider-Man or kill Spider-Man, that's big. We have technically the first physical appearance of Mary Jane Watson, so super exciting there, even though we don't get to see her face yet. We have a book that is full of panels, lots of stuff going on. Sometimes it works. The stuff where that scene again with Betty Brant trying to call Peter's house and the phone is busy. She puts it down and she paces and she picks it up and she puts it down. Great use of a lot of panels. Other places, maybe too many panels. Things that could have been combined into a more larger, maybe more exciting drawing were done in multiple panels. So has its pluses, has its minuses. Overall, for me, out of 10, I would give this a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good issue. Most importantly, you definitely want to have it on your reading list, because if you're reading like we are a new issue every week, this, if you don't read this one, you're going to be a little bit lost on some of the plot threads in the next two. So important to note, and a good start for the rest of the series. So again, thank you all for taking the time to check out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you do, please, again, think about subscribing to the channel. Drop your comments below. I definitely want to hear what folks say. And thank you all. We'll see you in a week for another Spider-Man art retrospective video. Thanks so much.